because of the historical relevance of this church and this site, and the fact that it is this nation's birthday and its independence. A lot of people, I think the first question today would ask, why should I celebrate July 4th today? And I know that in preparing for everything we want to do today, a lot of us in the Saturday Free School thought about Frederick Douglass. What does it mean? What does July 4th mean to a slave? I think that today our task is going to be to answer that question. And it's not going to be answering all the questions. We're not going to answer it all in one day. We've learned that in free school. But we're going to make a dent. We're gonna come away with a greater awareness. And I think just to start off, the fact that this country separated from Europe, a continent that had perpetrated so much oppression for so many different people. And I think that nowadays we could be pessimistic about July 4th, but we can't deny that it was a great step forward for human freedom. And for this church, what does freedom mean in this context? So we're not going to claim July 4th and everything that happens outside of this church. But today we're going to set boundaries on what July 4th means for us in the spirit and the tradition of Martin Luther King and Du Bois and James Baldwin. So, thank you for joining us on this hot day, when you could be going to barbecues, or maybe you'll go to a barbecue later. And I want to welcome our first performer, our first event on this program. So Jillian Pirtle is the CEO and scholar artist of the Marian Anderson Historical Society, a national historical landmark, cultural heritage institution, and nonprofit for over 31 years. And we're very graced today that she's going to perform the Battle Hymn of the Republic. All right.
Only eyes have seen the glory He is the victor's the grace of life are strong. He has the faithful lightning. His time so is true. Is oh, glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, 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 I have seen him in the watchfires on the and depths. I can read his righteous sentence by the deep his glory, glory, glory. glory. His truth is oh, in the beauty of life, Christ was born across the sea with his glory. His bosom transfigured me as he died to make men holy. Let us die to make men free. One God is oh, there's a fresh breeze of blow on the cross. And peace and progress and prosperity with security and plenty for the people to for the people's oh, from the village to the city of the nation down the rivers, cross the prairies, like a torrent it has poured. We will march with Martin Luther. We will fight with sword for the people's glory, 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 glory.
Thank you so much for that, Jillian. That some of the some additions were made to that song by Paul Robeson, who was a great freedom fighter for peace and justice, and who lived in Philadelphia for some time. Paul Robeson is important to Saturday Free School because of his steadfast principles to those views, and he never gave up on the American Revolution or that dream. And it's so interesting because one of the most famous things he did was go to Wales and speak to the miners there, and he's a product of the American Revolution, and that's what that song represents to us. But next, I want to introduce 4 people who read our declaration for the 250th birthday of this country. We're going to call it a People's Declaration. I want to invite first Jeremiah Kim, but later Jasmine Banks, Naima Murray, and Alice Lee will read the declaration together.
We can all come.
Good morning, everybody. Like Samir said, my name is Jeremiah. I'm a member of the Saturday Free School, and we're going to be reading something for you all today. And before we get to that, I just want to say a few things. First of which is, it's so nice to be here at Mother Bethel AME Church. This is, as they like to say, hallowed ground. This is the first independent Black religious denomination that was founded in the United States. Its roots go back to the 1790s, to the founding of the country. And like Samir said, we are trying to put forward and create a space for an alternative declaration of the people, by the people, for the people. And so we wrote in the Saturday Free School this declaration earlier this year. And just a few things we want to say about it. This is a time when our country is at war. And it's something that we address in the declaration, and something that we feel Americans, people in this city, are thinking about and should be talking about. And I also wanted to say that we have dedicated this event to two figures in particular, Martin Luther King Jr. and Richard Allen, Bishop Richard Allen, who is the founder of Mother Bethel AME, where we are today. And we are honoring both of those men as revolutionaries in the struggle for freedom. And especially Martin Luther King, who we argue represents more than, let's say, Thomas Jefferson, represents the future of what one might call the unfinished American Revolution. And so with that, we're going to get into reading this declaration. You can actually find it in the booklets that are passed out on page 19, I believe, if you want to read it on. A declaration of resistance and purpose in the 250th year of the American Revolution. In the 250th year of our nation's birth, the skies above the United States burn red with flashes of anger and blood. The specters of civil war and world war raise their head. So too does the unfulfilled promise of revolutionary democracy. All possibilities move closer toward us. Everywhere the people are thinking. They see America trapped in the wilderness of chaos and confusion. They know that change must come, and from their own hands. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that man is divine, that although he has unleashed enormous technological powers, he has yet to free himself. That of all human acts, the most sacred among them is an oppressed people's resistance to evil. But upon this basis, the American people can yet make the final leap that will usher in an age of humanity. We in Philadelphia, City of Revolution, declare this task to be our purpose. The American Revolution. Two voices speak to this moment. Thomas Jefferson and Martin Luther King Jr. One belongs to the past, the other beckons to the future. The American Revolution of 1776 changed the world, yet it was born twisted with contradiction, desecrating its own declaration of the equality of man. What Jefferson and his compatriots began, they could not complete. Democracy died, except in the hearts of Black men and women, most of whom remained enslaved. From this lineage and from the depths of oppression, Martin Luther King rises to the stage of world history. He stands at the center of the most profound revolution in our nation's life, the Black freedom movement of the 20th century, a man anointed by history and by humanity. In the dialogue between Jefferson and King, it is King who has the last word. If this nation is to have a future, Martin Luther King is the door through which we must enter. He is the father of a new American people, It is his voice that we need most desperately.
Yes, let's give him a hand. Yes, so a nation in the wilderness. We assert that the American crisis is in its deepest sense a crisis of civilization, a total crisis of the Western way of life. The signs are all around us. Our rulers have shown their depravity before the eyes of the world. They behave as hounds of hell, cut loose into fields of madness and brazen evil. Donald Trump is but one face of a dying white civilization, descending into civil war with itself. The American state, whose civilizational foundations no longer fit this time in history, which is more fragile than at any point since its founding. But what of the people? The majority of them reject the political system and its elites, but are uncertain of where to seek an alternative. While the nation celebrates its founding, the people themselves are deeply unhappy. For successive generations, they have been engulfed by waves of violence, poverty, and despair. Deliberate policies of the deindustrialization have destroyed whole cities. It is nothing less than a program of collective punishment and manipulation against working people. At the center are Black children and youth, condemned as criminals by a criminal society, placed under the iron law of a white supremacist system designed to suffocate their potential. Neither is white America immune. The widening afflictions of mental illness, addiction, suicide, and social nihilism cannot be explained as a mere economic problem. They are evidence of a spiritual crisis, of civilization that is in total contradiction to the aspirations of humanity. The gods of white supremacy have failed. All of this is shadowed by the festering cloud of war. Here is where the moral sickness of empire reveals itself. When an entire citizenry can see genocide and murder carried out in our name, and yet be induced to believe it is out of our hands. It is not the desecration of democracy and basic morality. We know in our hearts that a society cannot sustain itself on the slaughter of innocents and the suppression of mankind. Indeed, humanity must judge us harshly, so long as we abdicate responsibility for the course our nation has taken as the greatest purveyor of violence and terror in the world. As America's wars come home in monstrous form, a thought spreads among our people, including white folk, confronted by the mirror of themselves. If this is whiteness, we want no part of it. And so we face the moral imperative of our time. To achieve democracy, the American people are called to stop war and to abandon whiteness, a task of world historic importance.
The gift of Black people. We do not come into this crisis empty-handed. In a changing sea, there is one constant. That is Black people and their long struggle for freedom. W.E.B. Du Bois called it the gift of Africa to America. That force which inspires our nation towards its better self. From the ranks of the poor, the disinherited, and the youth, The rejected stones of history now become the cornerstone of the future. Black people who have never had illusions about this country bring to America's 250th anniversary the gift of their historical experience and consciousness. Where this country has nurtured cowardice and cruelty, African Americans have answered by waging a beautiful and beloved struggle to fulfill the dignity of a man and to fashion a society worthy of the child. Where this country has worshipped at the altar of violence, the Black freedom movement reached for a higher law of love and emblazoned for us a nonviolent path to revolution. By their resistance to white supremacy, Black people have built with bruised hands a civilization of their own. They have sung new songs, raised up new gods of freedom, truth and beauty that can answer the prayers of a modern people. Black mothers and fathers, church ministers, and factory workers have all played a part in forging a social system whose nature is to produce generations of freedom fighters. The greatest of all gifts has been the sacrifice made by the martyrs of Black people. Such heroic figures as Emmett Till and Natasha McKenna, who become at their moment of death, a link between mankind and the life eternal, the archetype of a new human being.
In battle for a new civilization, we face a paradox never before seen in human history. Two civilizations in one nation. We insist that our struggle in the 21st century must be seen exactly on those terms. All preceding revolutions in American life have presented the people with an existential moral choice. If there are battle lines to be drawn today, let us mark them between a civilization that defiles and kills children and a civilization that cherishes every child as sacred. Neither a civil war between elites, nor policies of reform, nor the slogan of economic class war can satisfy the deepest hunger of the people for change. The revolutionary spark that began in Philadelphia in 1776 has already been far surpassed in the centuries since. Our city has forever been changed by the Black freedom struggle. Here, best of all places, the Black proletariat have proven their capacity to govern. This is a Black city, and we are better for it. Yet it is a city where the needs of the people are not met, where every flower of their creative genius is crushed. Philadelphia stands again at the vanguard of our nation's consciousness, ready for reawakening. Now is the time for all institutions of the people to answer the call of history and uphold their responsibilities to the people, not to play the politics or seek fame, but to mobilize our communities into a new movement of civilization, what King called a revolution of values. Key to all this must be an all-humanity struggle for democracy, which has at its heart the struggle of ideas. For too long, we have let the fate of civilization be dictated by courts of idiots and fools. The day has arrived when it must be claimed by the broadest mass of the people, intelligent and beautiful in their shared striving. We in the Saturday Free School for Philosophy and Black Liberation dedicate ourselves to the democratic struggle with the people to make such a movement possible. Martin Luther King, our future. Martin Luther King is right. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. Over the bleached bones and jumbled residues of numerous of civilizations are written the pathetic words, too late. Today, all people must choose the ground upon which they fight. In the final analysis, we agree with the prophet of nonviolence, Reverend James Lawson, in placing our hopes of Black people as the bridge between a violent white civilization and a civilization that embraces world humanity. We take our stand of James Baldwin to challenge America to become the last nation that needs whiteness in its ideology, the last empire of the West, the place for a new beginning. We affirm that every American of goodwill is called to join in that destiny. Let the age of Martin Luther King be born. Let our people develop a moral criteria and vision to govern themselves. Most of all, let us rediscover our divine struggle for a new world. By it, we will realize the true nature and purpose of modern man as first revealed in the striving of the Black proletariat, who ask of the American experiment, who is man? Who is God? We, who stand at the crossroads of time, are now called to form a positive partnership with eternity, to build a new heaven and a new earth. We declare 2026 as a time to break silence, a time for the moral remaking of the American people. Let us now make freedom real.
Thank you to all the readers. What I took away from that declaration was the mention of this nation having two civilizations in one. And that's a concept from W.E.B. Du Bois that we learned inside of the school. But next, I want to invite Osiris Wildfire up to come sing for us. And Osiris Wildfire is a friend of the South Free School. And we want to cultivate a new type of civilization. Because if there's going to be two civilizations in America, the one that approves of children being killed in Gaza can't be the one that's allowed to go on. And Osiris is going to sing and at the same time represent a new type of civilization that we day. Thank you.
Hello. Before I sing, I'd like to say that declaration was very nice. It was very important that we listened to that. But you know, up the street, they have their own thing happening. And they're outside on a big stage, and there's a lot of people out there with red, white, blue on. And people are feeling so proud. And they're actually over there standing right there where the slaves were being sold with red, white, and blue on. Now, I don't know if y'all know that, but that's a disrespect. That's a disrespect. I mean, you could wear your red, white, and blue, but don't stand where the slave auction was at. That's not cool. So, you know, I do this for Dr. Monteiro. He asked me to do a song. So I'm gonna need your help with this song, if you don't mind. I'm gonna need y'all to do, if y'all can clap. Who got really good rhythm? Who got really, really good rhythm? So we can just go. That's perfect. Thank you. Sometimes freedom is a difficult ride because of all the senseless killing pain all the time. Mothers and fathers and children, yes, they cry. For peace we need to be doing more time. All we have in trouble understanding our right from our wrong. Boy, y'all nice now. Why every year we have to remind them of this song. I don't have to repeat freedom, 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 freedom. Nice now, everybody. Freedom, be the Black church. Freedom, freedom. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a Listen, oh Lord, give it y'all, give it to me. Away from my home, yeah, freedom, freedom, oh, freedom, freedom, come on, y'all. Freedom, 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 freedom. These are the times I feel like I'm almost gone. For my homes, people out there. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone. Oh, sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone. Give it to me, y'all. Come on, y'all. Take it down. Away from my baby freedom. Oh, freedom. Come on, y'all. Freedom. 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 I got a telephone in my bosom. I can call them up from my heart. Whoa, I got a telephone in my bosom. I can call them up from my heart. If you ain't clapping at me, you ain't doing it. I got a telephone in my bosom. And I can call them up from my heart. Come on, y'all. This for God now. Let's do it. Away for all our ancestors. From my home, baby, freedom. Come on, y'all. Freedom. Everybody. Freedom. Say it. Freedom. Come on, freedom. Come on, freedom. Come on, freedom. Come on, freedom. When I need my Father, I say Father. When I need my mother, I say Mother. When I need my brother, I say brother. Come on, y'all, clap. Come on, sit right here. When I need my sister. This ain't no performance. It's a call. I say sister. Oh, I say mother. Come on, y'all. Father, everybody. Sister. Mother. Mother. Father. Sister. Brother. Come on, y'all. Freedom, everybody. Freedom. 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 Yeah, 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 yeah. Let me make one thing clear. I am not a performance artist, and this is not a performance. This is a call for freedom, for real. Thank you, and thank you, Doctor. Peace and love.
Beautiful wildfire.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Osiris. That was really wonderful. And exactly what we wanted to embody in this kind of event. Next, we're going to have a small transition where we're going to put some tables together. Then we're going to listen to a clip from Martin Luther King's speech, Birmingham Jail. And
No, the letter from a
letter from a Birmingham jail. And then we'll have Dr. Monteiro speak. But we get some people to get the tables together.
Given how many people we have, I don't know if we're gonna be able to. Maybe we can just How about let's just stay?
Okay, just-
Doc, you want to go up there to get your talk? Okay.
Okay, we'll get some chairs together up here then, and we're gonna listen to a letter from a Birmingham jail.
So this is gonna be a selection from Letter from a Birmingham Jail. It's about 20 minutes and it's a part of the letter that we wanted to draw people's attention to. Read by Martin Luther King Jr. And so we're gonna listen through it, and Ms. Monteiro is gonna come up and give remarks about the letter from Birmingham Jail, what it means for us today in 2026.
In your statement, you assert that our action, even though peaceful, must be condemned because they precipitate violence. But is this a logical assertion? Isn't this like condemning a robbed man because his possession of money precipitated the evil act of robbery? Isn't this like condemning Socrates because his unswerving commitment to truth and his philosophical enmity precipitated the act by the misguided confidence in which they made him drink hemlock? Isn't this like condemning Jesus because his unique God consciousness, never ceasing devotion to God's will, precipitated the evil act of crucifixion? We must come to see that as the federal courts have consistently affirmed, it is wrong to urge an individual to cease his efforts to gain his basic constitutional rights because a quest may precipitate violence. Society must protect the robbed and punish the robber. I also hope that the white moderate would reject this concerning time in relation to the struggle for freedom. I feel that the people of ill will have used time much more effectively than have the people of goodwill. We will not repent of this generation, not merely for the hateful words and actions of the bad people, but for the appalling silence of the good people. Human progress never rolls in on the wheel of inevitability. It comes through the tireless efforts of men willing to be co-workers with God. Without this hard work, time itself becomes an ally of the forces of social stagnation. We must use time creatively, and the knowledge that the time is always right to do right. Now is the time to make real the promise of democracy and transform our pending national energy into a creative psalm of brotherhood. Now is the time to lift our national policy from the quicksand of racial injustice to the solid rock of human dignity. You speak of our activity at Birmingham as extreme. At first, I was rather disappointed. The fellow clergymen would see my nonviolent efforts as though becomes terrorism, one is of course complacent. Greater than part of Negroes who as a result of long years of oppression are so drained of self-respect and the sense of somebodyness that they have adjusted to segregation. And in part of the few middle-class Negroes, because of the degree of academic and economic security, because in some ways they profit by segregation and become insensitive to the problems of the masses. The other force is one of bitterness and hatred, and it comes perilously close to advocating violence. It is expressed in the various black nationalisms that are springing up across the nation. Nourished by the Negro frustration over the continued existence of racial discrimination, this movement is made up of people who have lost faith in America, who have absolutely repudiated Christianity, and who have concluded that the white man is an incorrigible devil. I have tried to stand between these two forces, saying that we emulate neither the do-nothingism of the complacent nor the hatred and despair of the black nationalists. But that is the more excellent way of love than nonviolent protest. I'm grateful to God that through the influence of the Negro Church, the way of nonviolence became an integral part of our struggle. This philosophy has not emerged by the hatred and despair of the black nationalists. But that is the more excellent way of love than nonviolent protest. I'm grateful to God that through the influence of the Negro Church, the way of nonviolence became an integral part of our struggle. This philosophy has not emerged. By now, many streets of the South were, I am convinced, be flowing with blood. And I am further convinced that if our white brothers dismiss as rabble-rousers and outside agitators those of us who employ nonviolent direct action, and they refuse to support our nonviolent efforts, millions of Negroes will, out of frustration and despair, seek solace and security in black nationalist ideologies, a development that would inevitably lead to a frightening racial nightmare. Because people cannot remain depressed forever, the yearning for freedom eventually manifests itself, and that is what has happened to the American Negro. Something within has reminded him of his birthright of freedom, and something without has reminded him that it can be gained. Consciously or consciously, he has been caught up by the spirit of the time. And with his black brothers of Africa and his brown and yellow brothers of Asia, South America, and the Caribbean, the United States Negro is moving with a sense of great urgency toward the promised land of racial justice. If one recognizes this vital urge that has engulfed the Negro community, one should readily understand why public demonstrations are taking place. The Negro has many pent-up resentments and latent frustrations, and he must release them. So let him march. Let him make pride pilgrimages to the city hall. Let him go on freedom rides and try to understand why he must do so. If his repressed emotions are not released in non-violent ways, they will seek expression through violence. This is not a threat, but a fact of history. So I have not said to my people, get rid of your discontent. Rather, I have tried to say that this normal and healthy discontent can be channeled into the creative outlet of nonviolent direct action. And now this approach is being termed extremist. Although I was initially disappointed at being categorized as an extremist, as I continued to think about the matter, I gradually gained a measure of satisfaction from the label. Was not Jesus an extremist for love? Love your enemies, bless them that curse you,
Do good to them that hate you and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. You nameless and extremists for justice. Let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. Was not Paul an extremist for the Christian gospel? I bear in my body the marks of the Lord Jesus Christ. Was not Martin Luther an extremist? Here I stand, I cannot do otherwise, so help me God. Was not John Bunyan an extremist? I will stay in jail to the end of my days before I make a butchery of my conscience. And Abraham Lincoln, this nation cannot survive, have slave and have free. And Thomas Jefferson, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. So the question is not whether we will be extremists, but what kind of extremists we will be. Would we be extremists for hate or for love? Would we be extremists for the preservation of injustice or for the extension of justice? In that dramatic scene on Calvary's Hill, 3 men were crucified. We must never forget that all 3 were crucified for the same crime, the crime of extremism. 2 were extremists for immorality, and thus fell below that environment. The other, Jesus Christ, was an extremist for love, truth, and goodness, and thereby rose above his environment. Perhaps the South, the nation, and the world are in dire need of creative extremists. I had hoped that the white moderate would see this need. Perhaps I was too optimistic. Perhaps I expected too much. I suppose I should have realized that few members of the oppressor race can understand the deep groans and passionate yearnings of the oppressed race, and still fewer have the vision to see that injustice must be rooted out by strong, persistent, and determined action. Let me take note of my other major disappointment. I have been so greatly disappointed with the white church and its leadership. Of course, there are some notable exceptions, and I'm not unmindful of these. But despite these notable exceptions, I must honestly reiterate that I have been disappointed with the church. I do not say this as one of those negative critics who can always find something wrong with the church. I say this as a minister of the gospel who loves the church, who was nurtured in its bosom, who has been sustained by its spiritual blessings, who will remain true to it as long as the cords of life shall lengthen. When I was suddenly catapulted into the leadership of the bus protest in Montgomery, Alabama a few years ago, I felt we would be supported by the white church. But this never came through. All too many ministers found themselves more cautious than courageous, and remained silent behind the safe security of stained glass windows. In spite of my shattered dreams, I came to Birmingham with the hope that the white religious leadership of this community would see the justice of our cause and be more concerned with serving as a channel through which our just grievances could reach the power structure. I had hoped that each of you would understand, but again, I have been disappointed. I've heard numerous Southern religious leaders admonish their worshipers to comply with a desegregation decision because it is the law. But I have longed to hear white ministers declare, follow this decree because integration is morally right, and because the Negro is your brother. In the midst of blatant injustices inflicted upon the Negro, I have watched white churchmen stand on the sideline and mouth pious irrelevances and sanctimonious trivialities. In the midst of a mighty struggle to rid our nation of racial and economic injustice, I've heard many ministers say those are social issues. with which the gospel has no concern. I have traveled the length and breadth of Alabama, Mississippi, and all the other southern states on sweltering summer days and crisp autumn mornings. I have looked at the South's beautiful churches with their lofty spires pointing heavenward. I have beheld the impressive outlines of a massive religious education building. Over and over, I have found myself asking, what kind of people worship here? Who is our God? Rather, their voices from the lips of Governor Barnett drip with words of interposition and nullification. Rather, when Governor Wallace gave a clarion call for defiance and hatred, rather, their voices of support, the bruised and weary Negro men and women decided to rise from the dark dungeons of complacency to the bright hills of creative protest. Yes, these questions are still in my mind. In deep disappointment, I have wept over the laxity of the church, but be assured that my tears have been tears of love. There can be no disappointment where there is not deep love. Yes, I love the church. How could I do otherwise? I am in the rather unique position of being the son, the grandson, and the great-grandson of preachers. Yes, I see the church as the body of Christ, but oh, how we have blemished and scarred that body through social neglect and through fear of being non-conformist. There was a time when the church was very powerful, and the time when the early Christians rejoiced at being deemed worthy to suffer for what they believed. In those days, the church was not merely a thermometer that recorded the ideas and principles of popular opinion. It was a thermostat that transformed the mores of society. Whenever the early Christians entered a town, the people in power became disturbed and immediately sought to convict the Christians for being disturbers of the peace and outside agitators. But the Christians pressed on in the conviction that they were the colony of heaven, called by God to obey God rather than man. Small in number, they were big in commitment. They were too God intoxicated to be astronomically intimidated. Things are different now. So often the contemporary churches are weak, ineffectual voice with an uncertain sound. But the judgment of God is upon the church as never before. If today's church does not recapture the sacrificial spirit of the early church, it will lose its authentic reign, forfeit the loyalty of millions, and be dismissed as an irrelevant social club with no meaning for the 20th century. Perhaps I have once again been too optimistic. Is organized religion too inextricably bound to the status quo to save our nation and world? Perhaps I must turn my faith to the inner spiritual church, the church within the church, as a true ecclesia and the hope of the world. But again, I am thankful to God that some noble souls from the ranks of organized religion have broken loose from the paralyzing chains of conformity and joined us as active partners in the struggle for freedom. They have left their secure congregations and walked the streets of Albany, Georgia with us. They have gone down the highways of the South on torturous rides for freedom. Yes, they have gone to jail with us. Some have been dismissed from their churches, have lost the support of their bishops and fellow ministers. But they have acted in the faith that right defeated and stronger than evil triumphant. Their witness has been the spiritual salt that has preserved the true meaning of the gospel in these troubled times. They have carved a tunnel of hope through the dark mountain of despair. I hope the church as a whole will meet the challenge of this decisive hour. But even if the church does not come to the aid of justice, I have no despair about the future. I have no fear about the outcome of our struggle in Birmingham, even if our motives are at present misunderstood. We will reach the goal of freedom in Birmingham and all over the nation, because the goal of America is freedom. Abused and scorned though we may be, our destiny is tied up with America's destiny. Before the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth, we were here. Before the pen of Jefferson etched the majestic words of the Declaration of Independence across the pages of history, we were here. For more than 2 centuries, our forebears made up this country without wages. They made cotton king. They built the homes of their masters while suffering gross injustice and shameful humiliation. And yet, out of a bottomless vitality, they continue to thrive and develop. If the inexpressible cruelties of slavery could not stop us, the opposition we now face will surely fail. We will win our freedom because the sacred heritage of our nation and the eternal will of the Almighty God are embodied in our echoing demand.
Before I invite Dr. Monteiro to give his remarks on that amazing speech by Dr. Martin Luther King, I want to inform everyone that we have a journal called Avant-Garde. We're going to be selling copies in the back. It's going to be titled In Battle for a New Civilization and for a New Civilization. And we also have t-shirts for sale. And I just want to say something about Dr. Monteiro. The first time I met Dr. Monteiro was on an off-campus student event for Students for Justice in Palestine. And he smiled at me. And it took me years to understand why I was confused why he smiled at me. And it was because I realized years later, it was the first time a college professor had ever smiled at me. So I just want to say that it's something to the character of Dr. Monteiro. So without further ado, with the top of the title, Mr. Dr. Monteiro.
Thank you very, very much. And I'm more than honored to be here today and to offer some thoughts upon this unbelievable letter from a Birmingham jail written by Martin Luther King Jr. in April of 1963. First of all, the question must be asked, what was Martin Luther King doing in Birmingham, Alabama in 1963? What brought him to Birmingham, Alabama? Well, first of all, we have to understand that Birmingham, Alabama in 1963 was the most brutal, the most racist, the most implacable white supremacist city in the entire South in 1963. Martin Luther King came to Birmingham with a small group of members of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Birmingham had just had an election, and they elected a reform segregationist, not an anti-segregationist, a reform anti-segregationist. And when Martin Luther King writes this letter, he is writing from jail. He had been arrested, and he was writing in response to a letter authored by 6 white clergymen, 4 Protestants, a Catholic, and a Jew. And what they said was that Martin Luther King was an outsider in Birmingham. That Martin Luther King did not understand Birmingham. And that he had no right to disturb the racial peace of Birmingham. And so Martin Luther King offers a very complex answer to all of their points. But let me just say this about the overall character of this letter. First of all, it is Martin Luther King at his best.
Yes, that's right.
You know, sometimes we get a little too comfortable.
Yes, yeah.
Even though things are not good, we're comfortable with things as they are. Most of us think we know Martin Luther King. Most of us think there ain't nothing that Martin Luther King can teach us in the 21st century. Because as you know, we've been through Black Power, we've been through revolutionary struggle, we've been through armed struggle and all of that. And Martin Luther King was advocating for peaceful means to transform the country. So Martin Luther King, according to many, was a naive Christian minister. And we, in the 21st century, want a revolutionary struggle. Now, none of the opponents of King, be they the revolutionary armed struggle factions or the moderates, have achieved anything close to King.
Right.
I was just talking to some sisters before we got started. And just to summarize what we were saying, this nation has no future without Martin Luther King. What Martin Luther King stands for is what this nation must adopt if this nation is to have a future. And therefore, on this 4th of July, in the 250th year of the founding of the nation, we are saying to understand 1776 and Philadelphia in the summer of 1776, you have to understand Birmingham in 1963. To understand what Jefferson only partially understood, you have to understand what Martin Luther King completely understood. So let me just draw your attention to a couple of things that King was saying. If you recall, he brings the idea of time forward. What he calls the white moderate, what today we would call the white liberal, who were joined, by the way, by most of the Black churchmen in Birmingham at that time. So King was not only talking to the white liberals, he was also talking to most of the Black churchmen who saw their faith not with the freedom movement, but in collaboration with the segregationist establishment, even though it had a liberal framing. But Martin Luther King had to address the question of them saying it's not time to do what you're calling upon Birmingham to do. So he raised the question of time. Time is not fixed, he said. Human beings determine time.
Yes.
And he went on to say, it's always time to fight for freedom. It's always time for the oppressed to stand up against oppression. But then there's something else going on here, because he would speak later on of what he called the colony of time and the empire of eternity. What was he saying? The colony of time. Remember, colonization restricted human agency, human action, human dignity. The colony of time is the use of time to restrict your action. If you are bound in the colony of time, you'll never find the right time to do what's right. You can always find an excuse for not acting.
Yes.
But then he contrasts the colony of time with the empire of eternity,
Yes.
by which he meant a cosmic partnership, a unity of all of humanity for the sake of freedom. Which raised another question in the letter. Because Jefferson spoke of the inalienable rights of all human beings that a government could not bestow upon you. It's not a matter of government, the basic rights of a human being. What Martin Luther King says, drawing upon Jefferson, and what Jefferson only partially understood, is that man is divine. And as divinity, man must be free.
Yes.
Which raises the other question. Not only who is man, but who is God? And so when he addresses the 6 white moderates, what he is saying, your concept of God distorts your concept of man.
Woo. Yes.
You have a white concept of God, and hence a white concept of what is human, and that a black person could not be human because the only form of a God that you could see was a white God. Who is man and who is God? Which could not be answered by Jefferson, but is answered by Martin Luther King. It's just another thing I wanted to say. The question of the church. The church is the most important institution among Black folk. W.E.B. Du Bois observed that on these shores, the Black church preceded the Black family. We were able to pray and meet on those days that we didn't have to work in what could be called the original Black church. We could do that before we could organize families. So the Black church on these shores is older than the Black family, which is not a bad idea. In other words, the spiritual community of Black people precedes the family. So the spiritual community is itself a family. It is a family at a higher level of communion. So then Martin Luther King critiques the church. And he's not just talking about the white church here. He says the church has become too comfortable with itself and its stained glass windows and its music and its finery and its ceremony. But that King was interested in the inner church, the church within the church, because the structural church, the institutional church, was too slow to move, was a victim in the colony of time, and did not want to go to the empire of eternity. Let me just end on this. Sorry. Now is the time
Yes,
in this country.
that's right.
I was on a talk show yesterday on a panel. And I have to tell you, I was a little bit disappointed with the panel, with the questions that they were asking in this time of crisis. Now, I'm not against sacred spaces being recognized, Black burial grounds, our great churches. But there's something that supersedes that in this time. We are in the midst of the collapse of an empire. Some people would put it this way, the collapse of a regime. We have never seen this before in this country. We have to begin with a recognition that our nation is the major purveyor of violence in the world. War after war after war, military spending, the likes of which humanity has never seen, while people's health care and the education of children is cut. So we have to begin with what is happening. We cannot retreat from the great crisis that we are confronted with. But crisis is a symptom of great change. I would not be so naive as to suggest that the road ahead is going to be easy. It's going to be very difficult. If the crisis to end enslavement in the 1860s led to a bloody civil war, this crisis is of that magnitude, but it can be resolved in the ways that Martin Luther King suggested. This will be the great challenge for us. I know there are those who want to look back to 1776 and say there's a lot that this country has to be proud of. The words of Thomas Jefferson. I don't think anyone, any writer, any theorist, any politician had ever written a declaration quite like the one he wrote. But that's the 18th century. The real pride that we must have as Americans is how we stand up to change this country at this time. And finally, we can bring about change. When King and Ralph Abernathy and Fred Shuttlesworth and Diane Nash and James Lawson, that small group of 11 people went into Birmingham in 1963. and they went secretly. They didn't tell anybody what their plans were. There was no guarantee they would be successful. But they said, as King said in this letter from a Birmingham jail, brilliant words. Truth defeated is more important than a lie victorious. And we can fight, and if we fight, we can win, but we must fight. If we care about children, what does it look like? We who have children and grandchildren and care about grandchildren and don't stand up as men and women against what is wrong. Don't speak out against the corrupt political system. By the way, it's not just Trump. The whole political system is corrupt. But now is the time for our freedom struggle to return to the foundations. As the spiritual gospel song, let us all go back to the old landmarks. The old landmarks. There's something about them landmarks. There's a reason they're landmarks. Let us all go back to Birmingham, 1963. Let us all return to Martin Luther King. Let us all return to the old landmarks in order to go forward to a genuine freedom and liberation for our people. Thank you.
In the spirit of a democratic forum, we don't just want to speak to you, we want to have a discussion. So we're going to have 2 mics running around the room. I just asked that, so we're going to have some time for question and answer. I just asked that you stand up so everyone can see you and say your name. Say your name is optional. But do we have 2 mics?
Yeah.
And
If you have a question, raise your hand.
people want to start raising their hands if you have a question or a comment.
This is Clayton Johnson. I think Tony's being a little modest. He's not announcing that we have the same mentor, work in the same church. And that we were at the epicenter of the civil rights movement when people did not believe that change could be made. Things that we're seeing today are not new. This is a rehash. This is the Reagan blueprint. Things that Nixon mixed up or messed up were corrected by Reagan. And the people empowered or think they're empowered today are trying to amend the things that Nixon messed up and trying to remove the flaws. That's why they're so bent on doing what they're doing. But Tony used to tell us about Dr. Sullivan and the stuff that Dr. Sullivan was telling us when we were little guys that we didn't believe. And how Dr. King would be here, and people never knew Dr. King was into it up. But we knew he was here. We also knew that Nelson Mandela would be set free. And we thought that wasn't going to happen. But because Dr. Sullivan told us, we believed it. And we lived to see it come true.
Clayton and I grew up in the same church, baptized by Reverend Leon Sullivan, which remains a moment of deep pride for me. And our church was based upon the social gospel. In other words, how could you tell people to live for the hereafter when they're doing bad in the here now? So Reverend Sullivan organized 400 ministers in Philadelphia with the slogan, "Don't buy where you can't work."
That's right.
And he broke down racial discrimination and employment across the city, one of the great battles in the civil rights struggle. So I'm very proud of that, and thank you, Clay. I am very proud to have grown up in that church, and I lived in that church. I was on the choir, I was a junior usher, I went to Sunday school, and so, yeah.
And she's so my hand up. My name is Jess Banks Smith, and I'm just so honored to be here. And thank you for inviting me. Thank you all for coming out to really appreciate it, especially to see so many young people. Thank you all for brought them out. This is such a wonderful thing. So, my name is called Dr. Tony, and I agree. He is so approachable and humble and rare, because most people who have his intellect are not humble as he is, and are not approachable. And so that's why I'm so honored to know you and to do anything I can to support him in the free school. So of course I want to know, how do we clone Dr. Tony and the Freedom School? Can anyone in here, if they can answer that? How do we clone you all? But how do we really, what can we do more to reach our young people, to help them to understand? I know we're not, it'd be great if we could write a rap song maybe that could help them to understand a lot of what's been said today. It's been very heavy. It's very heavy, but we're older. I'm a senior, and there are other folks who are older in the room. But what can we do? And this maybe might be for the group. What can we do to help the young people to understand? So that they can interpret and understand? Because you can hear something, but that doesn't mean you understand. So what do you think we can do besides writing a rap? Anybody can rap, maybe, so that we can reach them. Thank you so much for this event, too.
Can I just say something before I call? What can we do to bring more young people into the struggle for freedom?
Yes.
That was a question that they asked in Birmingham, because at a certain point, the adults ceased to participate in the civil rights marches in Birmingham. And Y.M.T. Walker, one of King's closest assistants, and James Bethel decided that they would go to the elementary schools, the junior high schools, and the high schools, and encourage the youth and children to become a part of the freedom movement. That it was a big debate about that. If we brought all these young people out of school and they got arrested, which they were going to be arrested, wouldn't that damage their academic records and their job prospects going forward? And there were two responses. One from Fred Shuttlesworth. Fred Shuttlesworth, I don't know how many people know the name Fred Shuttlesworth. Yeah, Fred Shuttlesworth. Fred Shuttlesworth said if they're old enough to make the decision to be baptized, they're old enough to make a decision about participating in the civil rights movement. So he was for the children being involved.
Yes.
But then there was Martin Luther King, who weighed in on the question, and he said that his own going to jail had deepened and improved his moral character. That what children would lack in their schooling, the days that they would miss would be made up in a deeper sense in the moral character that would develop among those children and young people because of their participation in their own people's struggle for freedom. So a lot of times people say to me, well, what do we do? Well, I think we have to not be afraid to turn over more responsibility to children, to get children involved. And I want to just right now emphasize children, because this is an anti-children society.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Everything in the society is militating against children.
Yes, it is.
The music, the movies, the pop culture,
Yes.
the schools are not pro-children,
No, see, now.
and children know it. So I'm of the opinion that in any movement going forward, and I think we save ourselves and we save our children to the extent that we commit ourselves to the struggle for our people's freedom. If nothing else, we need classes that help children to develop their consciousness. I have a friend, Blaze, who teaches very small children, almost infants, 2 and 3 years old. And you know, he tells me, he says that he sees real political and social consciousness in children as young as 2 and 3 years old. That children know something is wrong. And unlike many adults, children are more prepared to do what is right in an uncompromising sense. We all remember when we were children and we were young, that the thing that we disliked the most were older people who lied, who were less than truthful about the situation. So I think there's spectacular energy among children. It just has to be tapped, it has to be respected, and it has to be understood.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tony, for the thoughts that you developed in this presentation. And I've been asking myself, how do we lead up to this moment, this day, 250 years? How do Black Philadelphia present its narrative? And I think you rightfully gave a way to construct a narrative. And I do want to deal with this question about children, because you expressed it in the meeting that you were a part of yesterday. The discussion amongst Black, I'm focusing on Black Philadelphians because we are not really dealing with the crisis that we're in. We are, as adults, and the children see, feel, and know that. How can we aspire to if we're not dealing with that, as adults? The other thing that you crystallized for me in your talk was, and I think it's important, the Black church is older than the Black man. I never really thought about it. For Black people. And even, and I'll end with this, because as you were looking at the letter of Birmingham and King's nonviolent, I'm thinking about, Mother Bethel. I'm thinking about the ministers who were there in the making of this project. And then they were centering also in their speeches, in their organizing around a nonviolent revolution.
Yes.
And that now, in that letter that you put out, is that the Black church has relinquished its own tradition philosophical tradition. It's organizing tradition, it's vision. And Birmingham is a great example of that deep link in my mind. To that. I thought that was powerful.
If I could just have, and Richard, I agree completely with the way you're putting it and with the passion that you express yourself, which I've seldom seen from you. I don't know where this is coming from today, but remember in the letter from the Birmingham Jail, King says, when the institutional church fails, he will return to the inner spiritual church, a new ecclesiastical institution, that there's something beyond the buildings. And that is what the church ultimately is, more than the buildings. And that has to be what we build upon. And I agree with you here. And somehow I believe that it is the church that still remains the bedrock, the foundation of a movement. And I think King has it right. When he uses the word love, he's not talking of something weak, and he always says this. Ultimately, he links the question of love to the question of power.
Right.
He says that love without power is weak. Love with power is purposeful. So what is the point of love? And he's talking about two kinds of love here, by the way. He's talking about the Christian love. You know, John 1 and 2, God is love. But he's also talking about love in the Mahatma Gandhian sense of ahimsa and soul force. So he sees the potential for love to unite people, or to unite enough people to make a movement of nonviolence possible. Now, just one other thing that I didn't mention. King says that the civil rights movement began in Birmingham, not in Montgomery. Montgomery was 1955-56. So 8 years later, he says the civil rights movement began. And why did he say this? He said because for the first time, masses of people were prepared to go to jail for a cause. Right. Let's go forward to 2026. If the possibility of a non-violent path to revolutionary change in this country, if you ask me, I'll define what I mean by revolution. If there's a non-violent path to revolutionary change in this country, it could only occur, in King's sense, when masses of people are prepared to sacrifice, withdraw from the institutions of oppression and exploitation, and go to jail. Fill up the jails. War's wrong. Masses of people have to go to jail. The school system is not educating children and closing down schools in Philadelphia. Well, can you imagine that? Closing down schools? Right. They need to build more. Need to build more. The people must act by withdrawing from that system. Now, there was always in Birmingham and in the civil rights movement, I know I'm expanding what I started saying. There was always this debate between politics or protest. There were those who said, if we get the vote, we can change the system. And that's seductive, especially for those who run for office and are elected to office. But King said it is nonviolent direct action, which is the means to change. And he would use this phrase. He said, nonviolence is the weapon that heals. Nonviolence is the weapon that heals. Think about it. I mean, do we feel it's necessary? And this is a big question. It was a question for my generation after the assassination of Martin Luther King. They killed Martin Luther King. Now shouldn't we respond by killing white folk? Is not the door to nonviolent change closed with the assassination of Martin Luther King? And should we not now consider the prospect of revolutionary or violent upheavals in the cities around the country? You know, if you don't mind me just throwing this out a little bit more, it was expressed as we will make the cities the black man's land. We will make Philadelphia a city governed by the revolutionary black nationalists. You see what I'm saying? That violent revolution was the only path to freedom. Now, having been a part of that thinking in my youth, I can tell you that it is the assumption is that a small cadre operating without the mandate of the people would initiate acts of armed struggle against the police, against officials of the government, and in so doing, take power from them. The difference between that strategy and the Martin Luther King strategy is based upon involving everybody that's prepared to sacrifice. This concept of revolution as a democratic process of all the people, the seizure of power by the people, can occur if the people themselves decide that they must act and that they must, in the end, and can, I'm going to use the phrase, establish a new type of government, a new type of state, what we call a state of the entire people, a democracy of the entire people, the opposite of what we have. Now, we have to think this out. It is not our normal way of thinking. We are Americans at the end of the day. And we think that most problems in the end can be solved by force and violence. But what if they can't be? What if there is another historical narrative that suggests that the violent path to revolution is not the weapon that heals, but is the weapon that opens the wounds of hurt and division even wider? Let me say that again. Suppose violence and the violent path to revolutionary change, rather than unites the people and heals the people, divides the people and deepens the wounds of people already are suffering from. Yes. I think if you think about it, it makes us want to consider. It makes us want to consider the King's strategy. By the way, I know I'm talking a little too much, but you know, if you think about, we don't think about King that much. You know, when we say that his concept of nonviolence, the weapon of nonviolence is the weapon that heals, how many people know he said that? You might disagree with, but think about it. How many people know that he talked about time and talked about a colony of time being trapped in a normal concept of time? I got to go to work at a certain hour. I got to be at school at a certain time. I got to do this. The colony of time, which means we act on the basis of routine rather than doing things because they are right, even if it means sacrifice. To change time means to make a personal sacrifice. So I think King, if I could just say it again, he is the greatest thing in any discourse with Jefferson. And I don't demean or trivialize Jefferson. I know he was a slave owner, engaged in an existential battle with himself. He proclaimed that all men are created equal, endowed from the very beginning by the Creator with certain inalienable rights that neither the state or other institutions could take from them or bestow upon them. The problem for Jefferson was Jefferson's concept of man and God. Man was white and thus God was white. King resolves that contradiction with the claim that man is divine. And if man is divine, there are certain rights that neither government can bestow upon him or take from him. This is the way I think we must think on this July 4th. Expand the parameters of thought. Expand how we think. Don't, as they say, don't counterintuitive. You know, don't be bound by the way we're supposed to think. Think in the opposite way. Think in the opposite way and see what you end up with. How you end up. See what happens if in thinking counterintuitively. How does that alter the narrative that you have with children and young people? And I'm not putting children and young people on no pedestal, because they are impacted by the ideological currents of the society in which they live. And they know at a very young age the difference between white and black, between white supremacy and what is not white supremacy. But a narrative for children and young people must begin with a counterintuitive. If the society says violence is the way to solve all problems, the counterintuitive is that non-violence is the way to solve all problems. And let's see what comes out of that discourse.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Dr. Loretta Cheeks. I'm with this group here. I found this strong ties with Arizona. And it's thank you for allowing us to be here today. I just want to respond to the question about our children. Dr. Bagioki, I went to Southern University undergraduate, got my PhD at Arizona State University, first African American in computer science to do that. Dr. Bagioki has this, I don't know if it's a theory, we call it the law of human performance. And I just want to share it with you, but I want to couple it with the Matthew effect. So the law of human performance, as he say, is a mathematical formula, but it's physics. But I'll just explain to you in layman terms. Basically, what he says is there are no humans, as you just said, that are innately above the cuff of anyone else. We are divine. And because we are divine, it requires that we do tap in But we do that through a mechanism of sequencing, of mentoring, and making sure that our students have what they have. You can't leave them alone. The Matthew effect, as we know from the Bible, says those who are given will be given more. Those who don't basically withhold, guess what? It's a subtraction. You're going to be given less. So with that, what that means is we have to put our practice, it's called practice. We have to help our students to practice. Practice. Just like an athlete, we have Mr. Byron Evans here with the Philadelphia Eagles legends here, and he played with them for 8 years. It was practice that got me there. Even though we knew the rules, but it was practice. All of us, we have to practice. We want to be good at something, we have to practice. But even in spite of our practice, guess what? We need interventions. That's what I do. Everybody, if these students don't have an intervention, when they go to college, guess what? They're going to fade out. Because they're not going to see themselves neither in the equation, nor have the foundation they can stay. You have to have a mental association with that. And so I always say, in the way that I create, every curriculum that I create, you take what's in the student's hand to give them what they give them. You take what a student knows to give them what they don't know. They know gaming. Flip it. Give them what they don't know. They know sports. Give them what they don't know. I know artificial intelligence. I know mathematics. As you just said, we have freedom. We operate in freedom in mathematics. We call that a space of freedom, an expressivity of freedom. We express it through vectors and matrix, and we can actually move, but we have to understand that, how those things operate. There are no limits to what we can do, but we definitely have to have interventions. So that's what we as adults, when we're giving gifts and talents, and it don't take you to be you don't have to be a nuclear scientist. You don't even have to get, you take whatever is in your hand, you bring it to the offering table. You bring it before and give it to these students. And then I guarantee you that people will come along your side and help you. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again. I wanted to just touch back to what you were saying about outreach in the movement. And outreach in the movement for young people and children, but also those of us who are in the now. And the one thing that I can connect with very strongly is how the movement was affected by the arts. And I say that because the arts are a freeing mechanism throughout the apex of time and space and history. And it is one of the quickest ways of communication, of thought, expression, and feeling, and a catalyst for change. And if you will recall and realize when Dr. King was leading the movement, and every time he felt he had met a stumbling block, it was the arts and artistic expression that got him to the next level. And that was with people like Mahalia Jackson. That was with people like those who were creating a movement of themselves in music during that time, which was the new sound, is what they were calling it. And it was spreading throughout the country. But the new sound, which was the sound of Philadelphia, the Motown sound, was expressing itself through events that were happening within the civil rights movement. And of course, we can't forget about Dr. King calling our great Marian Anderson here in Philadelphia and telling her that he was inspired and cried with her historic moment at the Lincoln Memorial in 1939. As a child, he was there with his parents, and that if it were not for her, he would not be inspired to have had in 1963 of August his I Have a Dream speech, the location, and the March for Peace, Jobs, and Freedom. The arts have a way of healing and changing and getting to the message. And even today, I would say
what would be so helpful is if we branched out in communities and we expressed the movement, the message through the arts to get to children, young people, families, community movement, and that is through song, that's through art, work, visualization, that's through dance, that's through dramatic interpretation, readings. All of those things have a very fast way of movement to influence people. And you see, the arts today, or what people are calling the arts, has a way of influencing people in a negative way to do things that are not exactly great, or a positive way to create change, which we don't have enough of. So I think if we bring the message of the movement more into the arts, just as you did with your previous event here, it inspires, it heals, it helps tell the story and get the word out and get the movement out in a positive manner that gives people energy of hope, energy of positivity, energy of light to do amazing things. I mean, I'll never forget the expression when he was feeling Dr. King so low when he was getting ready to preach in church, and he didn't know if he could find the words. And when Mahalia Jackson started singing to him in church, right behind him, he lifted his head up and he started smiling. And then he felt that he could find the words. And by the time she was done lifting the church, he found the words. And he inspired, and it was one of the best sermons and speeches he had given to date. And so that is the blessing. That's the moment. And I think we as cultural investors, we as artists need to do so much more of that into the communities and with the people.
Yes.
First of all, I want to thank you for your beautiful rendition of the
Yes.
Battle of the Republic. A lot of people get the Battle Hymn of the Republic confused with the Star Spangled Banner. They are not the same, and they are not about the same thing. And just for everyone to know, Jillian sang it with the words of Paul Robeson in 1948, which added even a new dimension to this battle hymn against slavery. He said, "Now we must go forward." But yes, I agree with you. Art must envelop children and young people, but we cannot confuse art with most of what is entertainment. You know, entertainment is commodified, commercialized for profit.
Right.
And also to distort and so on the consciousness of young people. But I'd like to say, since you mentioned the church, we were talking about this earlier. I think some of our best art is still in the church.
Yes.
And I don't know any better singer than Donnie McClurkin, or John P. Key, or Rance Allen, or Richard Smallwood, or we can go on. This music is not just for the church, and contemporary gospel is contemporary because it unites the secular and day-to-day concerns of ordinary people to struggle, to perseverance and other things. So I think I agree with you about that. Just another small thing. You know, in the traditional church, music was an addition. But it seems to me in many of the contemporary churches, music is the ministry itself. And I don't find that at all putting off. I like that. I think music and art can guide philosophy and science and so on. Art is the imaginary, the thinking beyond just what you can see and feel. Art is the human in the full expression of his or her humanity. So I agree with you, Julie.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, good morning. My name is Bill Dickens. I'm a recent transplant from Seattle, Washington, to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Yes, the city of champions. You get that joke. My comment is this. On tomorrow, July 5th, Frederick Douglass' epic speech is done in 1852. I'm just interested in your comments about Frederick Douglass's epic speech, since it's in the 4th of July. In my opinion, I think Douglas' speech is one of the greatest speeches ever provided on American soil. But I'd just like to hear something about Frederick Douglas' speech. Thank you very much.
I agree with you completely. It is one of the great speeches of all time. And it is a worthy antidote to the hypocrisy of the founding fathers, as is King's letter from the Birmingham Jail. And I think the two of them can almost be seen as companion pieces. However, and I think what draws me to the letter from the Birmingham Jail is King's dealing with this deep structural question in American civilization: who is man and who is God? And we're not all praying to the same God. I know often through theology, theological schools, music, hymnals, even through the aesthetics of churches, we Black people sometimes make a compromise with the gods to whom we pray. For me, God is that absolute in the lives of human beings. Absolute truth, absolute freedom, absolute justice, absolute beauty. It is the measure by which we measure other things. So when King, and this is why the civil rights movement is more than a movement to change laws, it is a movement to change civilization. And when King raises in the most profound sense over and over and over again in the letter from the Birmingham Jail, in the three dimensions of a complete life, the question, who is God and who is man? But King wasn't the only one that raised this question. Father Divine raised that question. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad raised that question. Reverend Frank Cherry raised that question. They came out of the South after Reconstruction, what is called the first migration. And the first thing they did was set up churches. And the first question they sought to answer, who is man and who is God? And they, interestingly, unfettered by the traditional church and the traditional theology, often came to the conclusion, not only that man was divine, and hence Black men were divine, often seen as angels, but that God is Black. When Father Divine raises the question that he is God, and that the New Jerusalem was on this earth, what he was saying, or if the Honorable Elijah Muhammad says that God came to him in the person of Master Fard Muhammad. Well, first of all, in traditional white theology, why would God come to a Black man in the first place? You see what I'm saying? Or for Father Divine to say, I am God. Well, I mean, that's You know, the question is, if I'm not, you prove it. If I am, maybe you can't prove it. But the point is that if I am God, Father Divine, a black man from Georgia is God, then God is black. Which is the same question that King is raising. Who is man and who is God? And this is what is so foundational to the civilization of this society, the dominant civilization. White gods for white people. If God is white, then only white people are divine. And this is at the core of a deep civilizational rupture that's taking place in this country right now. Right now. This is more than an economic or political crisis. This is a civilizational crisis. This is a crisis at the essence, at the core of the belief system of white America. Now, the good news is I estimate that 20 to 25% of them in one or another way are saying they're through with this white thing. There is no white way out of this crisis. You know, specimen one, Donald Trump. If there was a white way, he would be the answer. But there is no white way. That the gods of white people traditionally cease to be legitimate even among white people. For example, I know I'm talking a little long, but I'm not kidding. Study after study shows that the mainline Protestant churches, the Methodists, the Lutherans, the Episcopalians, the Unitarians, are facing a crisis of legitimacy. And what is at the heart of it? Well, there are many questions. There's gender, there's sexuality, there's inequality, but at the very essence of this crisis is the crisis of, is God white? And if God is not white, what do the Episcopalians stand upon? And King was raising this question to these 6 religious leaders in Birmingham. And it's deep in the structure of the letter from a Birmingham jail. I think this is what is the contradiction of the 1776 revolution. God is white, man is white. Black people in many different ways have said, man is divine. And I'm inspired. I see my friend, Brother Gregory, Sister Catherine here from Mosque 12. And you know, we're always in discussion. You know, we in the free school, one of the most beautiful things is to be in that kind of ecumenical situation where you ain't in one church or one mosque, but you enjoy going to all churches and talking to all people. That's right. And one of the things we have done, we talked to Brother Gregory about the prison reform ministry of the Nation of Islam, but we also talked to Minister Ishmael Muhammad, the assistant to Minister Farrakhan. And, you know, our condolences. Yes, Sister Indonesia just died, and I know that must be a traumatic blow to you all. Yes. But we had an interview with Minister Ishmael Muhammad, and I remember asking him, by the way, the son of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And I remember asking him in this 6-hour interview, would there be a third resurrection? He said, well, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad prophesied that the nation would fall and would rise again, that there would be a second resurrection. And on the first day, this was 2 days of interviews over 6 hours. On the first day, he said, no, it is prophesied that the nation will fall only once, and there'll be only one resurrection. The second day, Brother Gregory and Sister Catherine, he came back. And he literally said that there could be a third resurrection. Now, how did I interpret this? I interpreted this as a new ecclesiastical synthesis of the thinking of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad as interpreted by the Honorable Louis Farrakhan in this second resurrection, with the great vision and imagination of Martin Luther King Jr. And I said it to Minister Ishmael. And I know, if you don't mind me saying, if y'all don't mind me saying, this is a difficult question for Islam, because Islam, the Quran is not the Gospels. There is no concept, as I know, in the Quran of God is love, John 1. I don't know. But this great coming together of the Nation of Islam and Christian theology as manifested in the thinking and speeches and work of Dr. Martin Luther King, if it can be pulled off, would be one of the great moments in the unity of Black people and a growing number of white people to achieve a new civilization in this country. The trigger forward would be the Black church and all Black institutions of faith, including the Nation of Islam, the Sunni mosques, and so on and so forth. But this coming together for the sake of creating a radical revolution of values, a new civilization, is very important, and hence the need for a new discourse. And I know, and I'll end on this, if you don't mind, for those who are not familiar with Nation of Islam theology, you might not know Sister Tanetta Mohammed, who was very important in developing a different theology in the second resurrection. And I think that she and her, especially she, and I know her sons, Rasul and Ishmael, were coming to that moment of unity and intersection between Islam and Christianity, something that has never happened in the world, but can happen here in the name of freedom and a new civilization. I think I've talked enough.
Actually, hello, actually I have a question. My name is Armstead Dickerson. I'm a local artist and poet. And got introduced to the first school actually last weekend. Saw on YouTube, but I thought stop by for today. Follow this line of thinking for a second. I think it'll kind of go back to what you were talking about. As an artist, I think a lot about expression. And part of my art is prioritizing truth and comfort, and bringing my own truth and then creating spaces for others to kind of do the same. As a person that grew up with a Methodist father, my mom went to Baptist church in Trenton, New Jersey. One of the things that I've struggled with as a youth and as I've even gotten older is restrictions that the Black church can place on individuality. I think there's a lot of tradition coming from theology, but often creates cultural policing of what a Black person is allowed to expressing things outside of that tradition can be viewed as threatening. So I'm actually curious, we're in a church here today, thinking about Black liberation. And I see a lot of what you're getting at is through the Black church. How do you kind of think about the nuance between Black church and Black liberation when that sometimes they can be opposed?
I agree with you. And that's why we always have to challenge, as King was doing when they went into Birmingham, challenging traditional thinking. And see, one of the problems is that the church carries a lot of authority. So it has a lot of authority to shut down opposite opinions. But at the same time, we would hope that the church would establish realizable moral boundaries. Everything can't be accepted anyway. You know what I'm saying? We don't want pure and absolute individualism, nor do we want a dictatorship. But I think we are compelled to challenge, all of what we consider orthodox theologies, because these orthodox theologies over the last 50 or 60 years have become dogma, and have shut down the possibility of creative engagement with struggle. Churches have become places where people go to be entertained and be comfortable, rather than places to be challenged. So I would agree with you. I would also say that it's not wrong to go outside the institutional church, as King talked about it, to discover the spiritual church. And if the spiritual church is not within the walls of a traditional church, then we should adhere to the spiritual church. And I think the theology of Martin Luther King is probably the most revolutionary theology this country has ever seen. Now, as I spoke about with Brother Gregory and Sister Catherine here from Monteiro, that even now we need a grander synthesis, a grander unity. But that does not solve the problem that you asked, which is the problem that Jillian put on the table. The imagination, the art, the poetry, the music that must, animate and enrich human beings. But then even that doesn't answer all the questions, because then we have to solve the problem of children. Is it just adults saying to children what they must do? Or must we create spaces for children to thrive and to grow? And I don't think anything does it better than music and poetry.
Have a few more questions. Also, sorry, we know that people are hungry. Our plan is to do lunch at 1 p.m. So if you're just a little more patient, if more people have questions, and then we'll wrap it up for lunch.
Hello, I'm great. And I have been, well, first of all, that was a wonderful, just powerful speech. Thank you very much. I wanted to just just as, traditional, how do we affect the children and reach them? I've been working with children, for years. And I think, first of all, we need to respect them and we need to listen to them. Don't make fun of their music. 'Cause I know when I was young, and still now, music is so very important. I don't necessarily, being old school, don't necessarily like the curse words. Sometimes disrespectful women, but have to be very careful when you criticize them. Listen to them and respect them. They're very, very intelligent. And as we all know, as adults, we know this is a very alienating environment that they're living in. And the young people particularly. Black boys, they know that they are in great danger. And this country does not support black boys or black girls. And they know it. And I lost a 14-year-old nephew to murder. He was murdered, my sister's only child. Yes, he wasn't in a gang, but he associated, he liked that kind of like wild lifestyle. But he was murdered by another, he was 14. He was murdered by a grown black man that was about 20. My family never got over it. But that young 20-year-old killer, if I do believe that if he had known he had a great opportunities in this world, he would not have killed anybody. But things must change.
Hello, Mr. Johnson. I do a lot of organizing around people that are homeless in the city, people with disabilities. There's events around like how they're doing it, and they've got their children taken away, you know, like frustrating black families overall. And I'm just thinking about here how, you know, I feel like sometimes I just don't want to talk that much because I'm like, I just want to do the work and like fight in the state to stop homeless and all that stuff. But it does seem as if there has to be some sort of consciousness change for people to like move to some other place. Well, otherwise, it's nothing, right? So I am just like thinking about here, like what's the education necessary? I will say what's the discipline necessary. I will say I think something that I struggle with is this thing where you'll be in spaces and somebody will say like, well, that's too much for that. You know, that's too much for this homeless person, or this, we don't want to put too much on this person, right? So, and I think it was a good, well, I don't know, good example of, I guess some of the conversations we're having about like what the pressure being put on these children, right? It's like, I do feel like it's very similar. When like we definitely know it's like, I feel like I'd like to hear your feedback on that, but I know that especially when it comes to disabled people, like the only way that we ever got anything was when people actually just got out of their wheelchair or like did a sit-in or like really went up against the seat. That was the only time we actually got the ADA pass when people were like had their broken bodies on like the Capitol and stuff like that. So it's just like, but I don't know, but it's like during these spaces, they'll just say that you make excuses for people and like, and then I mean, the thing that I feel is that like I feel like I'm always been in the position of like I'm being very hard when I'm like I'm actually being very easy. This is just history. Like go to the class, look up at the free floors, I mean, and see how change happened. It didn't come to this meeting. But I'm not, yeah, I don't know, I'm just talking now, but I'm just thinking about like how it actually happened because it is hard out there when there's a lot of friction and a lot of pushback against like what actually works.
Peace and blessings to everyone. Brother Tony, Dr. Monteiro, he spoke about who I am, but I would just like to introduce myself. My name is Brother Gregory Muhammad. I am a student of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, who sits in the seat of the eternal leader of the Nation of Islam, the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. I'm also one of Minister Farrakhan's student assistants to our national Nation of Islam prison reform ministry. I went to prison at 17 years old. And I'm hearing a conversation about our youth. You're talking about me, even though I just had my 69th anniversary this past Saturday. Praise be to Allah. I'm still here. What I really would like to do is follow up comments to what Dr. Monteiro shared with us. And I want to go to the beginning of the rebuilding of the Nation of Islam in America and the world. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said to us back in 1979, he gave a lecture, and the lecture was titled Ultimate Challenge, Survival of the Black Nation. And he shared in that lecture that he sat at the table of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and the Honorable Elijah, along with other ministers, by the way, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was talking about the fall of the Nation of Islam. And he said that the Nation of Islam would fall, but it will be risen back up again, never to fall again. Minister Farrakhan, however, went on to say, but that doesn't mean that you, as an individual, will not fall. And if you, as an individual, fall, then you have a mercy for a third resurrection. So I wanted to speak on that, and also speak on the fact that Minister Farrakhan, when he started the rebuilding of the Nation of Islam, he began to, well, let me say it this way, the churches became friends with Minister Farrakhan. And they opened the doors to Minister Farrakhan. So most of his work with the rebuilding of the Nation of Islam was done not through the mouths, but through the church. And to this day, and lands forever. For this day, to this day, we are still united with the Black church in particular, but all righteous people in general. So, I mentioned that I was 17 years old when I went to prison. And I was a lost soul. I was in a gang. I did so many things that was against the will of God within myself that I found later inside of the prison. So I can say, as Minister Farrakhan said to us in a lecture he gave, Torchlight for America. If you haven't heard that lecture or read that book, the book is available at the Final Call. Finalcall.com, you can go on there, store. Is that right, Brother Calvin? And you can find that book. In the book, he said that the black men in prison are like a Malcolm X type. Malcolm said when he was in prison that it gave him time to think. That's what happened to me. I got a time to think. I got the time to think. Peer pressure was no longer a problem with me. Wanting to hang out with my homies was no longer a problem with me. And by the way, when you go to prison, you still in the street. Because your homies is in there with you. There ain't no playground. But my point is, you can continue that same road all the way up to your release from prison and back in the street. Thankfully, Allah preserved me. And he put me in contact with his name. The Honorable Louis Farrakhan. Minister Farrakhan, through another brother in the nation by the name of Brother Jerron Muhammad. He's a writer, journalist. He wrote for the Philadelphia Tribune. He writes for the Final Call. And he has articles in other magazines. And he was an outside representative for the Nation of Islam Prison Reform Program. And he told Minister Farrakhan back in 1980 about the work we were doing in the prisons at Holmesburg, re-establishing the Nation of Islam Prison Reform Ministry, termed it back in Muhammad's prison program. And Minister Farrakhan gave him permission to give me his phone number. And as a result of that, this young boy who was just coming up, studying the Quran, studying Message to the Black Man, studying Our Savior Has Arrived, the Fall of America, the Flag of Islam, which is all the books of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. I mean, the oil and the light, when it went out, I was still reading. By going to the cell in front of where the bars at, is lights in the cell block in the hallway. I would go in the book 3, 4 in the morning. I barely got into sleep. As a result of that, I was able to help the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan re-establish the Nation of Islam Prison Reform Ministry in the Pennsylvania prison system. And he said to me in a phone conversation that he did not know of any other brothers in any other state in the country at that time, we're talking about 1980, that were doing a comparative work that we were doing in Pennsylvania. But Pennsylvania has a historical history with Muslims in prison, if you didn't know that. So I think I covered everything about the Monteiro. I don't even know.
All right.
I always say this. I want to extend greetings on behalf of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and his student National Prison Reform Minister, Abdullah Muhammad. Thank you.
I hope you all don't mind. I also have a question. So, for those of us who are here in the morning part, we read People's Declaration of Resistance and Purpose. You can find copies of it in the material that's available here. And I just wanted to share, and I guess maybe reintroduce myself, and Brother Gregory did as well. That I'm Jeremiah, the member of Disciple Free School. And I just wanted to share and touch on something that maybe people are questioning, thinking about, which is what are all these Asian people doing in a group that's about philosophy and Black liberation? And why did we write this declaration, this alternative declaration, in this time? And
it's beautiful.
And I guess the way I'd like to answer that is, as a, and I mean, the free school is not just Blacks and Asians, it's many different kinds of people, but that we feel that this time calls for revolutionary ideas, and not just ideas, but also courage. And we kind of looked out across the landscape of Philadelphia, the country. We looked at all the celebrations that were happening, the official celebrations, and we asked, why aren't more people speaking up? And this was in particular as the war against Iran was beginning to take shape. And, you know, we asked, why aren't more people actually addressing this time in the life of the United States? And so we felt that it's imperative for all people to actually have the courage to speak up and to not be afraid to actually say what's going on, everything that the people are thinking about, but also whether or not, you know, we have a future in this society, whether children will have a future, everything that we talk about. And we feel that that's something that everybody should be involved in. And for us, we see the greatest inheritance, and in many ways, the task that has been placed before, especially our generation, as being something that everyone has to pick up. And that comes from, like we've talked about, Martin Luther King and the Black Freedom Movement, and this wider canvas tapestry of revolutionaries who've been part of the Black struggle. We feel that that's something that belongs to everybody. And so I wanted to pivot from that to my question for Dr. Monteiro, which is, you know, as we kind of commemorate or comment upon the 250th anniversary of the nation, the founding, like we mentioned at the beginning, this is a time when America is at war. There's a war with Iran. They got in with Israel. And I also wanted to connect this to the letter from Birmingham, the Birmingham campaign of 1963, and ask, first, what does the war in Iran say about the nation's 250th? And conversely, what does Martin Luther King and the Birmingham campaign say about the war in Iran?
Can you hear me?
No.
I wrote the paper.
Hello, Reverend Tappan. It's nice.
You know, first of all, the war in Iran says everything about the state of America at this time. Can I just tell you all something? You know, the two bookmarks are the defeat of the United States in Vietnam in 1974 and the defeat in Iran in 2026. This is the greater defeat. This will lead to the undoing of the American empire, and probably the undoing of the state of Israel, hopefully. And new possibilities for democracy. When I say democracy, I'm not talking about the old type of liberal democracy. I'm talking about a new people's democracy. So I think this. Oh, I'm sorry. Forgive me. The war in Iran says it all. If you want to know what time of day it is in the United States, just look to the war in Iran. Now, to Martin Luther King, well, I think it's obvious that Martin Luther King always stood on the side of the anti-war movements, always. And he linked three evils of American society: racism, economic exploitation and poverty, and war. And I know everybody talks about we can't fund the schools. Certainly we can't fund the schools, especially when you got a president talking about a $1.5 trillion military budget. So I think, you know, the agenda for struggle is clear for us. a lot of people say, well, what are we going to do about the children in the meantime? And frankly, I have to say, I can't answer all of the questions about the ills of the society. But one thing is clear. If we do not end war and military spending, we are not able to do anything for anybody. That's right. You know, now, and then at the end of the day, we have to consider, like Martin Luther King in his famous book, Where Do We Go From Here? We have to think about a new type of economy, a socialist economy, an economy where the major wealth of the country, including the stock market, is publicly owned. And the wealth is distributed equally among the people. I think we are just at that point of reckoning and such. But to go forward, I think the future is the vision of Martin Luther King. Well, that's the way I would look at it. That answers the question.
You have one question? After Clayton, then we're gonna wrap and transition with a brief announcement and then move to lunch.
Clayton, make them short questions.
Thank you. This is a short question. And I just wanted you to share, if you would, the reality of Dr. King, both Dr. King and President Mandela, both refusing to leave jail when they were offered their freedom. They chose to stay in jail because of what would happen if they left jail prematurely.
Well, I don't know that he refused to leave jail.
He did. He did. Okay. Because he did not want children to be in jail and him to get freedom.
Okay, yes. But, you know, great revolutionaries always prepared to make great sacrifice. And King and Mandela were great revolutionaries. There's no way to talk about them in any other way. And I think I was on a panel with Reverend Cavaniss yesterday. And part of it, you know, people saying it with progressives and so on. And I said, well, you know, I'm a revolutionary and have been that all of my life, you know. And so I think it's an honorable identity to take on. And I don't run from it, I run to that identity. And I'm proud to say in any occasion that I'm a revolutionary. And I seek for revolutionary transformation of this society. But I'm a revolutionary in Martin Luther King, W.E.B. Du Bois' way of being a revolutionary. I'm not a revolutionary that believes that revolution is just destruction. A revolutionary, to be a revolutionary, has to have a positive program of freedom and rebuilding humanity and society. So that's the way I look at it. But, you know, you can't be a great revolutionary without being prepared to make a great sacrifice.
And for the younger people in the room, most people are not taught that Nelson Mandela refused to leave jail because it was the premature leaving jail would have inspired, would have caused a revolution, an uprising of Black people. What Nelson Mandela feared was that when they were setting a trap so that if he walked out of jail prematurely, Black people would rise up and kill every white person that they saw. Nelson Mandela said, when they came and said, Atiba, you can go free, he said, no. I will set my freedom. Because if I walk out of here now, we're gonna kill all the white, they're gonna kill all the white people.
Okay.
So he said, I'll stay here.
I'll have to refer to my good friend Catherine Blunt, but we can talk about that later.
But anyway, for the young people, he said, I'll stay here until you set your term, okay? And then I'll tell you when I leave jail. He said today.
Thank you, please.
All right, with that, we're gonna conclude our event. We're gonna have about an hour for lunch. But before we end, I just want to invite my colleagues, Michelle, Jeremiah, who are our editors for Avant-Garde and Saturday Preschool Journal, releasing a new edition, and it's for sale back there along with some t-shirts. Here's Michelle.
Thank you for bearing with us through what has been a long program. I know that I've been so we'll keep this short, but like Samir said, the Saturday Free School publishes a journal called Avant-Garde, a journal of peace, democracy, and science. And we've dedicated the newest issue of our journal to what we call the battle for a new civilization, something that we talked about in the declaration this morning. And in particular, I just wanted to call out that the issue includes an interview with the man you just heard from, Dr. Tony Monteiro. If you're curious about his life, but not just him, but what are the possibilities for people, especially young people, to become revolutionaries? What does that look like? We talked about that with him. And it also includes articles on the war in Iran, on the Epstein files as well, and many other topics, including immigration. And kind of the centerpieces of the issue, however, are these two reports that we did. And I'll let Michelle talk about the latter one, but just one of the reports that we did, it's a sociological report that we have tried to follow in the footsteps of W.E.B. Du Bois in Philadelphia. And we're interested in this question of who is man, who is God, like Don talked about. And so we went out and we built relationships with institutions of what can be called Black Gods, the Black Gods movements of the 20th century. And we're interested in those places where Black people are coming together and are making that resistance, not oftentimes in the ways that are most visible, but are in many ways the movements that have kept communities together and allowed Black people and the nation given us an idea that is worth fighting for. So yeah.
So I'm Michelle, I'm a member of the school and also one of the editors of the journal. Like Jeremiah was mentioning, many of the younger people in the free school, we actually began working on the content for this issue right around a year ago. So we've worked very hard to produce this. And myself, along with a few other members, we had interviewed Brother Gregory Muhammad, who's president with his wife, Sister Catherine, over a period of over 100 years to study the institution of the Nation of Islam Prison Reform Ministry as one example of principled nonviolent resistance that does address the crisis of the crisis of civilization today, to seek concrete answers to the very concrete problems we face. So we really invite all of you to support our journal, to share our journal. We really try to make each word and each image in there count, and something that can speak to many generations of men and women of goodwill to come. Finally, I want to say we in this room are present because we see ourselves as wanting to be architects of the future. We want to hand down a bright future that the youth deserve. And in many ways, this journal is our voice, it's our blueprint, it's also our flesh and blood. And in a way, in the same way that we hope that this journal can be a bridge between anybody, in the city who seeks social transformation. We hope and we invite anyone who, to just share it, and to use it as that bridge for dialogue, to use it as that bridge for revolutionary transformation. And we've been very mindful to structure the content that way. So please support our journal. Also, all of its contents will be available for free starting online. Today is our official in-person launch, but you can find all of its contents at the online site, which is avant.com. Thank you.
If you buy a copy, you're going to get a free t-shirt as well. Exclusive free t-shirt. But with that, we're going to break for lunch. Thank you, everybody.
Press this. You guys want to